So welcome to today's training. We are going to be chatting about how to go about creating a capabilities deck and how to utilize a capabilities deck to help you win deals and bring in more clients. If you haven't gotten a copy of the worksheet yet, please click on the first comment below. I'll make sure my team has the link there for you. So what I see happen a lot when it comes to sales for agencies is that, the capabilities deck that you have is more of a pitch deck, and it really doesn't set you apart from your competitors. And it makes you actually seem a bit more of a commodity because you're selling the different things that you actually do rather than the outcome. And quite frankly, the prospect isn't going to remember you next week because they have become disengaged. It's too long of you trying to actually pitch them on what it actually they need and what they want. And you have this, like a lot of times, this massive list of different things that you do. And ultimately, it doesn't actually create trust. They're not compelled to want to work with your agency. And, they don't really have a reason why they should be doing this now, which causes you to lose a deal because they end up delaying the decision making in actually working with you. And the further and further that they are from the conversation that they've had with you, the less likely they are actually to engage. And ultimately, it doesn't actually build confidence in what your agency can do. And they don't really understand that you can solve their problem, which you can. And ultimately, that's really important, right? Is that you want to be able to ultimately be able to stand out for your competitor. So what we are going to help you do today is establish a methodology for you to be able to stand out from your competitors so that you are remembered, you're top of mind, and ultimately because you have now positioned your agency as the expert. And it ultimately just makes them want to work with you. It's not a long sales process. You don't have to do many and multiple follow-ups. And you don't feel like you have to pitch anymore because ultimately what you're trying to do is have a conversation with them about value. And so you've already gone through what it is, the mechanisms that you do that help them accomplish their goals. And finally, then one of the most important is that it builds trust with them. And this is the biggest reason that people lose deals. And I know that so many of you may believe that it's based on price, but it's actually about trust. Whether they trust that you're going to be able to help them, whether they trust that you are going to be able to help them get to their ultimate goal and that they have a high likelihood of achievement. So I wanted to talk about the capabilities deck in overarching to start, and then we can actually go through the different components of a capabilities deck. So to start with, the thing that is really, really, really important is that it shouldn't actually take you more than 15 minutes to present the deck in the first place. So I've seen so many times where the capabilities decks are really long, and I've seen them in the 70, 80 pages before. Hopefully yours isn't quite that long, and it won't take you quite as long to be able to condense this in your deck into a more succinct version. But it shouldn't take you more than 15 minutes to be able to present, and ultimately it should be less than 15 pages ultimately as well. And keep in mind, this includes your case studies and making sure that your case studies are actually case studies and not just a presentation of your work. There's so much where agencies are allowing themselves to be perceived and the work that they do based on the subjectivity of whether someone likes the design. And ultimately, that's not why decisions were made. And it's extremely important to make sure that it's clear as to what it is exactly that was done and the reasons why and what was the result from the work that was done. So I want you to think about it in the distinction of whether someone is actually trying. So when they come to work with you, whether it be branding, whether it be a website, whether it be social media, what they're looking for is they're looking to generate leads. They're looking to increase their revenue. They're looking to have greater brand awareness. They're looking to have greater connection with their consumer, right? You need to make sure that you're talking about those outcomes and not the input. So it's the input versus the output. So the input is the work that you did, right? You created a new brand that had different messaging, that had all these different things. that allowed for you to actually work towards to accomplish that end goal. But you're not actually talking about the end goal, and I want to make sure that that's very, very clear when it comes to case studies. So let's start at the very beginning of a capabilities deck now. So the thing that you want to do is you want to have and start off with what it is that your focus is, why you exist, what it is that you do, right? In a very short, succinct way, be able to actually let the prospect know ultimately that they are in the right place and that you do what it is that they need, right? Or that you're going to be able to help them accomplish their goal. It's extremely important that this is done in a way that allows for them to really truly connect to you. So, and I'm working with a client right now that was having a little bit of an issue because she wasn't really sure about the connection that she had to her ideal client, and wasn't really sure how exactly to go about doing this. And there was a ton about her story that actually allowed her to connect specifically to her niche. And it can be a story about you. What is the reason why you have this connection as a human being, as a person? What is the reason why you are here doing what you do? Why does it matter? The second thing that you should be doing in your capabilities presentation, likely the second page, is work to actually establish authority. This is done in a couple of ways, but the typical ways are in awards, so a recognition of things and work that you've done, media, so different media that you've actually been represented, to conferences that you've been in attendance to, ultimately also in a lot of cases a client wall. So who it is that you've worked with, who it is that you've helped, and the vast majority of time what I see is, you're using the biggest names that you've worked with. And this can be both a good and a bad thing, because you can borrow from the authority of the brand of the clients that you've worked with, and allows for your prospect to have a greater amount of trust with you because these larger brands have trusted you. The other thing that this does is it also has them think that you don't understand them. So it really depends on the type of client that you are targeting. So if you're listing enterprise-sized clients while pitching a small business, that isn't actually going to create the amount of authority as you think. So you have to be pretty strategic in really making sure that you have a very clear understanding of the psychographic and demographic of who it is that your ideal client is, because the dynamic of what happens for them when they're seeing the types of clients that you're listing in your capabilities deck really sets the stage for how they engage with you from that point forward. So if you have this large enterprise-sized client and they're a small business, they're going to think that you're too expensive, that you're too large, that you're not going to understand them, because these are the types of clients that you work with. And it can also go sort of vice versa, right? If you're working with large enterprise-sized clients and you're using brands that they don't really recognize, that's also going to do the exact opposite, right? Where they're going to feel like you don't understand. So it's very important. And so if you are working with this large range, which I do not suggest, by the way, and you can take a look at me in either my podcast or in my book about selecting a niche and actually having your demographic fully outlined. But it's really important that you're able to distinguish that. But if you are going to have this large range of different clients that you work with, what I would suggest that you do is actually have this page, depending on the size of client or the industry that you're working with, so that they can have a bit more of an understanding of who that you work with. The next piece that's really important, and this is the next two pieces of your capabilities deck, really changes the way that the client engages with you, and I want to lay the differences out here. So many of you, when you're a smaller agency, you are the one that the client is talking to and wants to talk to you on an ongoing basis. And the reason that this happens is because you've actually sold them that on your expertise, or sold them on you. You are the expert, typically the one that has the most experience in your agency. So you are the one that they want to talk to because they feel most safe with you. You sold them, they trust you, they want to work with you. So it's really important that you understand the distinction. And I'm mentioning this because I'm going to actually hit why this happens in the next two pieces of your capability stack. So the next two sections, and we'll talk about them a little bit separately as well, is the components to your agency and then your process. So the components to your agency is done typically in two ways. Either it's your team and like a description of each one of them, or maybe like a collage of your team or a group photo or something like that that allows for them to connect with you guys a little bit more meaningful. One of the other ways that you can go about doing this is actually if you have a specific set of people that they actually talk to on an ongoing basis, from, you know, an account manager to a designer to, you know, a strategist, and that's the people that they work with on an ongoing basis. And you list those three roles rather than individuals. And so you don't actually have to list them as individuals. That you say, hey, these are the three people that you will work with on an ongoing basis. And you're actually selling the expertise of your team in this scenario. You can do the same thing when you actually list the people as well. But it's important that you actually start to elevate the team. If you elevate the team and you sell based on the cumulative experience and why you have specialized people that work on those specific items and how it's important to them and how it helps them accomplish their goal, they're going to want to talk to those people. So it's the difference in the way that you actually have the prospect thinking about it from the onset of the conversation. And it's extremely important to recognize how this actually impacts the entire relationship with the client. And I know so incredibly often the growth of an agency is actually the glass ceiling, essentially, is the amount of time that the owner has, because they can only talk to so many people in a given day, in a given week, in a given month. And so the amount that the agency is able to grow is based on this. So I want you to start thinking about how you can start to sell your agency's team. And whether it's a group of freelancers or not, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you need to start selling other people aside from yourself. And if you're talking about, you know, me or I type statements, you need to start changing them slightly to, you know, we and the agency or the team type statements that allow for them to start to understand that there's someone that's helping you getting that work done. The next piece that's really important, and this continues on from this last thing, is your process that I just mentioned. And this is extremely important for multiple reasons. So the prospect, in a lot of instances, wants to control, one, what it is that you're doing with them, two, the way that you work with them. They're trying to get you to augment your process to work within theirs. Ultimately, that doesn't work for your agency. And the vast majority of time, it actually doesn't work for the client either. It also continues to add on to the fact that the person, the prospect and future client, is actually buying into the process that you developed in your agency that allows for you to accomplish the results that you accomplish. And so you actually want to really sell this process. It's extremely important that this is branded, that this is named, that this feels proprietary. It should be proprietary, but it actually is something that you do. And this is something that actually already exists. There's so many agencies, when I start working with them, believe that this is something that they need to create. But this is something that you do every day already. And it's important that you recognize this. And I want you to create a graphical representation to how it is exactly that you go about working. And I see this happen in sort of flowcharts, in circles and ovals, in the infinity loop is typically the way that I see the process actually being depicted. But I want you to create a graphical representation of what it actually looks like to work with you. And, you know, I want you to clarify for them and want them to really feel that this is something that you have done repeatedly with clients, that this is something that's not new. This is something that you have developed over the course of your career, and that expertise that you've built that allows for them to really feel comfortable, understanding that someone will buy from you when they trust and believe that you're going to help them accomplish the outcome. And if you have a process that does this, you're allowing for them to feel more confident in the fact that you're going to be able to then, as their confidence increases, your price increases as well, which means that you'll have greater amount of resources internally to be able to work on the project, which also then increases the likelihood that they're going to actually be able to accomplish that end goal. So I think it's really, really, really important that we recognize and do not overlook this process piece. It's extremely important and really one of the main hinge points of how you actually want to be positioning your agency. So I talked about case studies at the beginning of the conversation, and this particular area is one that I get really animated about, because The vast majority of them, as I mentioned, are utilizing them as if it's the subjective approach to the way that they've actually worked with them. Sometimes they show, here's the design of the website before, and then here it was afterwards. But it doesn't actually talk about anything that was accomplished. So this is how I want you to think about a case study. So what's really important when you are thinking, and I'm going to move the mic a little bit closer to me. What's really important when you're thinking about a case study is you want to think about the emotional story and then the result that actually this client was able to accomplish. So what was the challenge? What was the thing that they were faced with when they initially approached you? What was the thing that they were not able to accomplish? And then you actually want to talk about what it was that was, and some of this is going to be actually written. I'm not a big fan of a lot of text on a page. This is something that you can talk to when you're presenting the case study. But ultimately, you want to be thinking about it in sort of the third-party selling method, which is what was the challenge that they were faced with? Then what was the negative impact? So what was the emotional impact? How did it impact their life because of this challenge? Then I want you to actually talk about the objection. So this, and people don't really think about the amount of importance when it comes to the objection, when it comes to sales. And this is every single question that a client asks is actually the objection. So I want you to talk about this in the case study, which is important because this is likely the same feeling that they're having right now. And if you're able to manage before it's actually a rooted feeling in them, you're able to manage that objection much better, especially through someone else's experience, not through actually just talking to them about it, right? And actually making them feel comfortable and having them feel comfortable. So if you can talk about someone else's experience that they had that exact same feeling, and then you did X, Y, Z, what the service was that you offered, the actual end result, what they got and what that happened. And ideally speaking, I would love for it to be numerical, right? We generated this many more leads in specified number of days. We were able to increase brand awareness. We were able to increase the amount of, their NPS score, their Net Promoter Score, whatever it was that you were able to accomplish through the work that you did with them. What was the numerical value that it actually helped them accomplish? They increased their revenue this much, again, whatever it is. And then the emotional impact that actually happened from that result. Now this business owner was able to, invest in the team, was able to no longer be worried about cash flow anymore, was no longer in this place where they felt like, that they were not going to be able to provide for their family. And it was really important and meaningful for us because we were able to work with a brand that we really enjoyed, a company that we really enjoyed. And so you're connecting yourselves to them, you're connecting their story to them. It's really, really, really important that your case studies are impactful and emotionally impactful, which is what a lot of them actually miss on. And so then the final thing that you should actually finally leave on is two things. One, if you have some sort of testimonial, which if it's directly related to the case study, you can actually include it in the case study, but make sure that it's tight, succinct, just, how they actually felt. You want it to be as emotionally impactful as it possibly can be. And then finally, because of the position that we utilize the case study in the sales conversation, this is part of an hour-long meeting that is primarily the discovery call or the strategy session, or however you want to call it, or ideally even naming it proprietary name for your specific call. You're actually going to have them and ask like a thought question. So what are we going to do next? Or what is the brand that we are going to create? Or what is your story? Something that is a thought question that is going to allow for them to be able to start getting into the mindset of being asked questions and actually engaging with you now in dialogue. And one last final tip is that you do want to make sure that you pepper in points in which you go through the actual presentation and make sure that you're asking questions of them and making sure that they're very clear. I see people go through these long sort of monologues, which again, which is ironic because I'm going through this, 20-minute monologue right now. But you want to make sure that you're asking questions of them so that they're able to stop and engage if they do have a question, or you're able to actually make sure that they're there and listening and engaged in the conversation that you're having. If you have any questions about capabilities decks, please do shoot me a message. You should be able to click on my name as one of the admins of the group, shoot me a direct message, or go ahead and just comment directly on the board in this page. I'm absolutely happy to help you with any questions you have. The capabilities deck is ultimately extremely, extremely important. and allows for you to separate yourself from your competitors and being able to actually close higher paying clients on a more regular basis. And so this cannot be understated. You really should spend some time thinking about and working on your capability stack. All right. Hope you enjoyed this training and that it was extremely helpful for you.